So for today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to take a specific topic that we think is very important, and rather than just treating it as a news item, we're going to put a specific episode around it and hopefully use it to be a positive part of the overall conversation. But it's to do with the Sam Joel of GiveTree. I don't even know what to describe it, whether it's an incident or a debacle or a situation.
I think it's all of those words you just described. My first read of it was, is this actually for real? But it's probably good to start maybe with a bit of a recap on what actually happened and how it unfolded.
Yeah, so Bronwyn Clune of Capital Brief had done an interview with Lainey, and that topic was just around championing more women in startups, some of the experience that she had in the past. It was a good article that went into a range of different topics that you would expect that you can put out into the world and people read it for what it was. And then Lainey posted it on LinkedIn. And then what seems to have happened, I think it was Saturday night, Sam Joel of GiveTree started commenting. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that publicly, I must admit, with some of the descriptions that were used, and they're all catalogued in the AFR and Capital Brief and Startup Daily. And they've done a whole lot of reporting there that I'll put in the show notes that we'll link to. And then people would then come and comment. People were then commenting on Sam's comments and calling him out for what it was. People like Hannah Moreno, Trina Probert, and he then started attacking them as well and started attacking a whole range of men as well. But as was pointed out in some of the articles, the vitriol and the sexual nature of the attacks were quarantined for the women. And then he, on Sunday, deleted the comments. And during that process, it seems that the comments prior to deleting, LinkedIn said that they didn't violate community standards, which anybody that sees the comments, I just don't understand on what planet that can't violate the standards. And as Lainey pointed out in an article, if those comments don't violate, what the hell does?
Yeah. Exactly. I'm absolutely shocked by LinkedIn's response. And my first read of Sam's comments made me think his account was hacked. But no, these were his genuine comments. And I think to Lainey's point, if this doesn't constitute or violate community standards, then at LinkedIn, then what does constitute that? Because this is pretty extreme.
And so what then occurred was that LinkedIn did finally take them down and delete his account, or at least suspend him, but only after reaching a certain threshold reports, right? And then Sam then tracks down Hannah's contact details online and emails her Sunday. But Hannah, being an absolute professional, and I have worked with Hannah and her husband Jeremy, did some really great work for me in the family office when one of the business units was dealing with an issue. And an absolute professional who was then able to transcend what was occurring and throughout Sunday guided this individual into a full-blown apology. And we'll get to the apology in a minute, but could have taken a very different path, but decided to use this as an opportunity to guide this individual into some proper accountability, some public accountability, which then led to an apology, which was posted by GiveTree, which then yesterday turned into a resignation and some more commitments to do, I don't even know what it is, to do better, to start a process of therapy, to start unpacking what it was that was underlying, driving to this issue. Trina did a great post that I'll put in the show notes that I think it balanced an empathy for the human, but the need for accountability and ensuring that this path was followed through. Jessie Wu of Afterwork then also did I think a really good post pointing out that in this situation, the individual did it all publicly, and therefore there was able to be a public response of accountability. A lot of this behavior happens behind the scenes where you don't have that public ability to come out. And Claire Bristow of Scalata posted a comment there that I'll put in the comments that shared her experience with this individual how she had been targeted, the threats that had occurred, and her not feeling as safe environment to try and tackle this publicly. So that's the 50,000 foot view.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the big emotions I'm feeling is absolute respect for the way Lainey, Trenna, and Hannah responded and handled this situation. I think they managed that process incredibly well. Some articulation of an understanding that there's obviously some other stuff going on here with Sam and that. But I think the way that they called out this behavior, the way that they are now communicating and managing, I think was just absolute respect to them. I think they handled that incredibly well. And I think Jesse Wu's post as well, for me, really highlights, is an example of a very public incident. And yet there's so much that's still happening that doesn't make the light of day, which is it's a really scary thought, and something that I'm obviously in an incredibly privileged place to not have these sort of things affect me the way they happen for others.
Yeah, these ladies have been able to really step up and do and is give a masterclass. The analogy for my simple brain, I often categorize this in it's like playing multiple games of tennis on different tennis courts. That on one hand, one game is the actual individual and still being able to have some empathy there and having the ability to at least understand why something may be the why it is, but you don't actually have to tolerate it. There's another game simultaneously of accountability, and it doesn't matter why something happened. What happened is the most important, and how are you going to solve that? And ultimately, Lainey did a post earlier today that I saw that it's there. I think the words were there has to be a middle ground between inaction and cancelling. Otherwise, why would anybody ever apologize or seek to improve? And I think the ability to try and hold those opposing thoughts of we have to hold account here. We have to ensure that change occurs. We have to do it for ourselves and others. But how we do it can still seek to try and ensure that this individual can get to a point where they are hopefully a better functioning human, and that becomes some value to other people as well.
And it highlights Lainey's awesome point that there needs to be a path for, what's the right word for it? Like a path for change. There needs to be a mechanism, or all of us need to do something to take individuals on that journey and to call out these behaviors more broadly.
Without wanting to be too simplistic, Aaron and I spoke at a high school, and one of the things in my presentation was about compounding interest is not just a financial thing. Compounding interest actually works with thought and behavior. And you've got to catch yourself, and you've got to have people around you that are going to help catch. But in this instance here, I have to believe that Mr. Joel here, that compounding interest of certain thoughts and certain patterns and certain getting away with certain things. I had a chat with Lainey on Tuesday morning, and then I also spoke to Hannah as well, because even in my own reaction to this, there was a lack of self-confidence of the stereotypical privileged white male bowling in with solutions. I don't like being part of the thoughts and prayers club. Like, oh, sorry, this happened. My thoughts are with you. But in some of those conversations, you realize that actually you do have some influence. You do actually have some power. You do have some control, and we do. And for me, I've got a couple of levels. One, I preside over and responsible for a family office. So there's a big responsibility there that I'm sure that I could be doing more on. With Tribe, we allocate capital on behalf of investors, right? We screen deals, we do due diligence, we decide to invest in deals, and money has always come with strings and influence. And I think acknowledging we as men don't live in an environment, certainly in my case, have learnt more and more of what women have to deal with. Like even little things. I remember being in a peak persona cohort and a few people talking about exercise. A number of the ladies saying, I can't do it at that time of the morning, or I couldn't do it at that time of the night, or I couldn't do it by myself. And even then it's, I've never, if I want to go running at 3:30 in the morning through the back streets of, I'll I just go and do it. I don't have that worry about. And then at events, I've never had some of the issues that we've constantly seen at events and online, the unsolicited approaches. We don't live in that same environment that only in the last few years have I started to really understand. But you've got to understand it, and then we've got to do something about it.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, it was through that same community and an ex-girlfriend that I learned so much, so much perspective that I just wasn't aware of previously. And exactly the same sort of things. For me, the privilege of just, I can get up at 4 a.m. and go for a run and not think about my personal safety, and to walk into a room and my perspective walking into that room versus for others, and particularly what my ex-girlfriend shared about her perspectives walking into a room and the dynamic of that room and reading the energy and fear of leaving an event late at night or being at an event that is mostly male attendees where there's lots of drinking happening, for example, like all these little things that I've had the luxury of not having to worry about, and realizing that, wow, I can be doing a lot more here as part of Tribe, as a ecosystem and community leader, but also simple things like my behavior, even running in the morning when I see another runner, simply crossing the street to be on the other side of the road to create distance and create a safe space. Like there's so many little things that we can be doing. But on the bigger level, I think absolutely for Tribe, we being more cognizant, putting in place some policies around things like our investor syndicate, some code of conduct that we can have in place, particularly around events, particularly for us without the fact that we do offsites and trade missions where we're in quite intimate settings or intimate environments, spending a lot of time together. I think making sure that our codes of conduct and our behaviors and our leadership through those actually dealing with these types of issues and addressing these types of concerns as well.
Yeah, the time is now for people like us to get on with it, because they've been talking about these things for a long time. But whilst the behavior is often black or white, there are some. It's what do you actually do? How do you make it structural? How do you make it systemic in terms of the response? And in the family office, one of the groups of assets is childcare, and I was reflecting to some conversations of a couple of behaviors of fathers aggressive towards some staff, and my view, I'm not saying anything to do with this, I'm just a little bit punchy sometimes. I was like, all right, get rid of them. We're not going to tolerate that. But then the staff are saying, actually, why would we penalize the child? We're here for the children. We want to give them the best opportunity. So then suddenly you're in a leadership position trying to balance out, say, yeah, I get that, but then there's a safe environment. There's demonstrating that we're not going to tolerate these things. And if a conversation with the parent doesn't work, it's just it's not black or white.
Yeah.
And a couple of the articles have really driven home that it's really the victim of any of these things has to be front and center, which I totally agree with. The pattern that I see here with Sam Joel is because he made it public, it meant that a public response, a village response, an integration of a whole lot of people were able to bring to bear, A, the taking down of the comments, B, hopefully some change, and C, some movement on this topic. And one of the challenges can be is that it can feel, I think, when things happen behind the scenes or they aren't as public, when other people step in or want to step in, it's how do you actually get change? Now, my view, the problem is that in this world that I live in, it takes a village to do all sorts of things. It takes a village to raise a child. And in this instance here, had the village not have stepped in against Mr. Joel, and that village starts with just Elaine, Hannah and Trenna, if they had decided not to do anything about this, and then some of the broader media coverage that it's gotten. And so it's how we sort of balance that. This example has demonstrated why I think it needs multiple people from multiple different directions coming in and creating that social pressure and consequence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, definitely calling out my own lack of prioritizing getting these types of policies in place at Tribe, for example. And I think when you're head down in your venture and there's burning priorities and everything else, like in hindsight, alignment of those priorities and the need to give this priority is really important. And that's definitely something we've been talking about and want us to take on and remedy.
Yeah, do you guys have any thoughts on a pathway for change, or even perhaps what we can do about it from our point of view as Tribe?
We had a conversation that there are some things that we're just going to do. We're not going to wait for anybody. But then there are some things that people like Hannah and Elaine and Trina are driving from a crowdsourced point of view. And Lainey's leading that with accumulating some things in her post this morning. She's going to get all those and she's going to put together some work and share it. Yeah. And so for us, rather than being, here's the solution, this is what we're going to do on all things and our way is the right way, there are some things that we're just going to wait and be collaborative on, see what's coming out and be hopefully a positive part of that and try and put all of our energy seeing that initiative is successful. But what we can do is if you break down a business like ours, there's the companies, there's the shareholders we bring in, and then there's our shareholders. And so we run events. I humbly submit hopefully some of the coolest events going around. But if you want to be coming to one of our events, is we're going to work on and implement some fairly specific code of conduct that we want to utilize some of that crowdsourced stuff and be a positive part of that. And in that code of conduct is a series of rules, but not just rules, there needs to be processes. And I don't want to sound like these are all my ideas. I don't remember exactly. I think a lot of this comes from Lainey and Hannah, so I don't want to be the stereotypical white male that's had a conversation that's then stolen all of those ideas. So let's just say that all of this ideation comes from them. But code of conduct, process, who to go to, how would it be handled, being very clear. All the process stuff to at least give some confidence and to take away any ambiguity that if anything happens, here's our process. So there's scaffold there. I think Lainey called it the structural way of doing it. And with our investee companies, one of the strings. What are your policies and procedures here? Okay, if they're not there, here's what we are requiring. And in that as well, there will need to be board agreement and board sign off. And then for ourselves, because we can govern through things like shareholders agreements, we ourselves having the expectations, the process that we will be adhering to, that will then include some kind of independent aspect to assist. And I think they need to become like a minimum hygiene level. And we can argue what should go into the documents and we can work out how to make them as strong as possible. And the good thing with the legal system is that if somebody, in our view, contravenes something in one of those, and if they don't agree, that's what lawyers and courts are for. So we don't really even have to worry about that. We just have to worry about our documents, our values, the behaviors that we expect. So that's where we've gotten to in the last couple of days. But because it's Wednesday and we record these things on a Wednesday, we're not as developed and we don't want to come across as we have all the answers, but we want to be part of a positive conversation without hijacking it.
Yeah, so for us, there's a fair bit of work to be done there internally. And yeah, very keen to hear thoughts from others on how to get these policies and everything right and looking at the crowdsourcing of ideas and to make sure we do get that right. Keen to get into it.
Right. These are just our interim thoughts, just a group of people wanting to be part of the conversation, wanting to lend our support to it, and here's to improving the position going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.